Alejo Patata by Charles Joseph Albert. Alejo was the eldest of the Zapata children. His nickname was Alejo Patata because when he was no more than 3, he composed a song about himself which began, El gran Alejo Zapata no es una patata. The great Alejo Patata isn't a potato. The younger children sang the song every time he came home from school because it was rather catchy. This gave Mama Zapata visions of musical genius, and so his parents bought him an upright piano, used because they were thrifty people. Alejo grew up to be a sturdy young fellow, well-formed, with a lush head of curly black hair that was the envy of the girls in his school, and their mothers too. Kids in the small Catalan town of Girona respected him, for he was intelligent and always cheerful. He played badly but cheerfully in the street soccer games. He played piano in the school orchestra, and he was far and away the top student in his class. He was always in a good mood, even when his father scolded him. When he was 9 and studying for his first communion, he came home one day with tears in his eyes and told his mama, "Father Aragon says that Papa is going to hell because he reads Interview, and that is pornography." This was in the early 1960s, and Senora Zapata understood that sexy magazines with scantily clad centerfold models were nothing more than an outlet for a generation of young men who'd survived the Civil War and were now expected to build the economy. So rather than confront her husband about his racy periodical subscription, Mama Zapata pulled Alejo out of the Catholic Church. The papal doctrine against birth control was about the only part of the whole Jesus thing she'd believed in anyway. At this point, she was now pregnant with her 6th child. She made Alejo start taking cornet lessons instead. By 12, Alejo had moved on from cornet to trombone and played in a municipal jazz band. He'd finished most of his parents' collection of literature in Catalan, Cervantes, Shakespeare, Hawthorne, and Dumas, and begun to read his father's old mathematics textbooks. Within a few years, Alejo had taught himself Euclid's geometry and Newton's calculus. By the time he started high school, he'd already completed their entire mathematical curriculum. No one knew why, though his father often joked that it was probably because math is easier to figure out than girls. Alejo entered secondary school in 1969. There were 2 young ladies in his Spanish literature class who'd been especially drawn to his shy, unassuming demeanor and who gazed with admiration at the generous pile of dark curls upon his head. But Alejo had no interest in them, and whether his social awkwardness was the result of his Catholic upbringing or a curious antisocial tendency inherited from his father, wasn't called Alzheimer's back then. Wasn't called Asperger's back then. No one could say. When he took the geometry test and scored an impossible 20 out of 20, his teacher, Senor Lordo, was incensed. The damn kid knew more math than the teacher. He promoted him to trigonometry, kicked him upstairs, as it were, with a special relish. Let him be Senor Herrero's problem. This worthy realized that Alejo could only proceed in his math studies at the new local university, Universidad de Girona. They didn't have a math department yet, they were only starting out, but they had one faculty member with a doctorate in math, Professor Alessandro. To accommodate Alejo, the professor designed a course of private instruction, so the boy came to the university campus every day after high school let out. During these secondary years, Alejo practiced the sophomoric antics which long-suffering younger siblings the world over may recognize. He traumatized his younger brother Vincenz with the announcement, "Everybody in the world except for you is a robot, and we are all studying you." Whenever his sister Eulalia would ask where Mama was, he'd say, "Le mangiat." I ate her. And no matter what Nicolao's question, his answer was always, "Pebrengra," peppercorn. As Alejo entered the final year of secondary school, his reputation as a prodigy had spread, and he was awarded a summer internship at SEAT, the Spanish auto manufacturer. This was one of the first companies in Catalonia to buy computers, and he joined the team that installed their bank of IBM mainframes. That earned him an invitation to return the following summer for another internship, this time to help write the program that optimized the engine performance of their economy sedan, the Seat 600. The internship paid next to nothing, but Alejo was so thrilled to be working on a real computer he didn't care. On the day he was given a small desktop-sized computer to work on from home, he was so happy he couldn't stop smiling. By the time he graduated from secondary school, he'd already exhausted the mathematical resources of Professor Alessandro and of the University of Girona. The dean of the university presented Alejo with a scholarship to the University of Barcelona, that ancient and world-famous school only 50 kilometers from home. But Papa Zapata objected. The scholarship did not include room and board. It's not worth the money to live in that city of crooks, his father said, and forbade Alejo from leaving Girona. Since the University of Girona didn't have a math department, they matriculated Alejo into the School of Engineering. His engineering professors recognized him as a welcome computational resource at the time, the mid-1970s, when the calculator and the PC were not yet available to the public. They asked him to do their complex calculations for them at no pay and without any credit for his contributions. In this way, he helped colleague after colleague with their research. When Alejo finished his undergraduate degree, Senor Professor Alessandro helped him gain acceptance into the graduate department at the University of Madrid, which at the time was considered one of the best math faculties in the world. Alejo was allowed to pay his tuition and board with a teaching assistantship. As he was only a graduate student, he wasn't supposed to give the actual lectures, but they asked him anyway. They were short-handed and knew he wouldn't complain. Alejo was now 20. His students were only 2 or 3 years younger than him. A beautiful girl named Fatima flirted with him every day in hopes of improving her grade. She hooked him harder than she'd expected. He fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. "I don't know if I love you, though," Fatima told him. "I can't decide between you and Marco." Marco was the son of a wealthy furniture dealer in Granada. Alejo understood this was about what each man could offer to Fatima, so he gave her his car, which his father had purchased secondhand with Alejo's SEAT money, and which he had only loaned to Alejo so that he could drive home from Girona to Girona for holidays. Fatima kept the car for 3 years, driving it until the engine burned out. She never had any basic maintenance done on it. A month later, she married the furniture dealer's son. Alejo sat in the pews and with tears in his eyes watched them exchange vows. After that, he buried his heartbreak with a renewed focus on his research. He completed a doctoral dissertation on solitons, single waves that don't travel in groups like regular waves. One night, Alejo was walking home late from his office when he had been working on solitons all day. A group of 3 young immigrant men began to follow him. Alejo didn't want to seem racist, so he did not take pains to cross the street to get away from them or duck into a cafe with people or anything. Instead, he reminded himself of the importance of open-mindedness while allowing them to catch up to him on a dark and isolated street. When one of them produced a large knife and demanded his wallet, he was nearly crippled with anguish. Such racist stereotypes! He began to sob uncontrollably. Embarrassed by his behavior, the attackers grabbed his wallet and ran away. Another night when he was walking home, now in a different neighborhood, an older woman came up to him and asked if she could go to bed with him. He was afraid to appear prejudiced against old prostitutes, and he didn't know how to make her go away. She followed him all the way to his apartment, talking the entire time about how she had once been the mistress of the biology dean until he died of a mysterious infection. When Alejo reached his apartment building, he planned to squeeze into the front door and close it on the unwelcome woman, but she had already stripped naked in the time it took him to unlock the door, so he had to let her into the building. Rather than follow her in, though, he closed the door behind her and ran as quickly as he could to his advisor's house, 4 miles away on the outskirts of town. He didn't dare return to his apartment until 2 days later, after he had been able to confirm from his apartment manager that his naked squatter had left. Somehow she'd gotten into his bedroom and taken all of his shoes. The following year, Alejo published his doctoral thesis. He was now looking for a tenured teaching position. But, despite his brilliance, his higher ability was reduced by not having gone to the world-class campus of the University of Barcelona when he had the chance.